Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Anything presented by Moshe Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Moshe's Director of Personnel. We're glad you're with us for this episode of Ask Anything, and with us today is Chris Boyd, one of Moshe Consulting's principal consultants. Today, we'll be chatting about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. Chris Boyd is a principal consultant at Moshe Consulting and serves as the Oracle Technology Lead. He has been with Moshe Consulting for the past 8 years and has been an Oracle Database Administrator for 30 years, with experience in a wide array of technologies in the database, system administration, and development arenas. Chris, welcome to Ask You Anything. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you.
We're certainly glad to have you with us to talk about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So let's start with the basics. What is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure?
It's a infrastructure as a service provided. It's a direct competition there with Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Infrastructure and Amazon Web Services, AWS. It came on the scene in 2016, so a few years behind some of those, but it's got some unique advantages to it. It has a rich feature set, just like all of the others, but it has some advantages, sort of being the new kid on the block, if you will, because they've been able to adopt a lot of best practices, achieve some operational efficiencies on how they even host it at the physical level, which lead them to ability to provide some cost savings for the customers. So they baked in a lot of really innovative security enhancements over some of the other cloud providers. And so I just think it's a really unique offering that we potentially have for our customers in providing some cloud services, whether it's just a few aspects of their infrastructure or the entire infrastructure. I think it's a really rich tool, and more importantly, for the user, is very easy to use and work with, and for the customer is significantly less expensive than the other vendors.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because it sounds to me like because they were a little bit later in the game than most of the other competitors that you mentioned, they were able to take the good things that they might have seen and kind of implemented them into its features. So what are some of those features that you alluded to earlier?
Mainly, I was referring to the fact that they have adopted a lot of the best practices that have sort of evolved out of how to run a hosting service. And so because of they've been able to pass along the savings to the customer. They've been able to handle things in a more efficient way, where it's on-site personnel, literally, that they're having to pay for, the physical machines that are on site in their data centers. But they certainly have innovated quite a bit with the very seamless way that they provide redundancy. They have built in, I'm going to scratch this, Brian. They've been able to provide some really good, seamless fault tolerance, providing high availability to everything across the board, whether it's compute instances, as they call them, the VMs, or the database-related services that are provided. Certainly the autonomous database service itself, by being a database as a service, has that sort of redundancy built in. You don't necessarily have to get by with a clustered database to provide horizontal scaling and high availability, and spin up a data guard standby database to fail over to in the case of any hardware failure or on-site hosting failure. All of that's sort of baked in.
So it sounds to me like they've been able to take some of those features, and I know you mentioned some of the back-end things that they've been able to learn from the others, but what are some of those features that Oracle Cloud Infrastructure has?
Yeah, not necessarily that this particular aspect is anything new, but they really do have very seamless high availability, very seamless fault tolerance in literally everything they provide, whether it's the compute instances, otherwise known as the VMs, or the database. All of those have built-in fault tolerance that kind of crosses all the way from defining and allocating your tenancy to a region, which is the same concept that every other cloud vendor has. But the geographic region actually is composed of multiple physical data centers called availability domains. And then even within the data center, they have what are called fault domains. They are physically separate locations within the data center, and all of your resources are fault tolerant across all of that. So there's literally no way for a particular service to be unavailable. And while it may not be completely unique, they have definitely perfected that. They've been able to kind of steal the playbook, if you will, from the other vendors and build it up from the ground up in a better, more efficient way. And like I mentioned, by doing so, they've been able to pass a lot of those savings on to the customer, and as a way kind of carve their way into the market a little bit more with an incredibly competitive price on all of the comparable resources.
So for the customers, that last item that you mentioned, how does that help them when they're implementing something as OCI?
I think the critical key is that by being the new kid on the block, if you will, they've been able to build from the ground up using principles that had, say, Amazon been able to do over again, they would. Oracle, by being newer and by taking some of the critical thought leaders from all of those different competitors, they've been able to build it up the way that they wanted to. So there's a better foundation, both in terms of operational efficiency, like I said, and in terms of baked in security. Everything is encrypted by default, both at rest and in transit. And everything is created and backed by, at a minimum, Oracle managed keys.
So what are some of the ways in which OCI can be used for?
It is a complete infrastructure as a service. So theoretically, you could run your entire organization's infrastructure in the cloud. You would have a virtual network that's composed of multiple subnets, either public or private, defined and configured in such a way that you want. And within those subnets, you can locate compute resources. The database as a service, called the Autonomous Database, actually is a Oracle service that is accessed from outside your virtual cloud network, your VCN. But you could either have the entire infrastructure or parts of it, even just simply the database backend to your applications, and they can connect to the Autonomous Database service in Oracle Cloud. They also provided several other features to assist your entire organization in the development process and the development operations realm. They have a Kubernetes cluster, virtual Kubernetes cluster called OKE, the Oracle Kubernetes engine. One advantage of the Autonomous Database service is that you're getting the Cadillac of databases. You're getting an Oracle database, but you're not paying what you're probably used to paying for it. For the on-premise licensing, I think that is admittedly a lot of the reason that a lot of organizations have moved away from Oracle when they're running on-premise, because the licensing is so expensive, so prohibitive. And every new feature you hear about that might be good to implement, oh, well, guess what? There's a separate license cost for that. And I think people have grown weary of that. Well, the good news is with the Autonomous Database service, you're getting a full featured Oracle database for the price of virtually cheaper than any database, even lighter weight open source database that you could try and run on premise. That is a unique advantage. I know that AWS obviously has a counterpart database as a service called RDS, but this is running, and they do run Oracle as an RDS, but there's the Oracle license that gets bundled with it. And RDS itself for AWS is already more expensive as a service comparably with the Autonomous Database service. So I think the advantage we can offer our customers is to get them into a very robust, very sturdy enterprise level database. But by running in Oracle Cloud, you're getting an Oracle database that is not near as expensive as you're probably used to. So you're getting the benefit of a Cadillac for the price of a Yugo. Let's just put it that way.
And what about from a security standpoint? Are there any security advantages to having OCI?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think one of the unique things is that by default, data is encrypted in transit and at rest. So you're not having to go through a whole series of configurations to ensure that this going to this is encrypted and you're utilizing TLS here. And okay, now I'm storing it. Do I have to configure that in the database, this particular table space? Do I encrypt that table space when data is loaded into tables that are allocated there? All of that's taken off the table. You don't have to worry about it. It's all set. And one of the unique advantages too with OCI as compared to the others is that you don't get charged for egress. Data that goes out from OCI, you're not charged for that. And that's where usually people get a lot of sticker shock. It's near impossible to estimate the amount of data that's going to be traversing the network. I should clarify that it's after 10 terabytes per month, you get
Oh, wow.
charged per gig, a very small minimal amount, but realistically speaking, you don't get charged for egress. And that is a huge advantage for people to consider. And I think even if people aren't necessarily as concerned about price, it's certainly worth knowing that it's there, but knowing that you also get a full set of features that you would be used to with any cloud vendor, along with the price, along with the assurance that you have baked in security that you don't have to configure every nook and cranny for. I think, and you have what amounts to, as close as possible for a pay as you go type of concept like cloud, you get as close to as possible some idea of a fixed cost that you can budget by. I think all of those things together make this a very attractive package for people and attractive for us as a consulting company offering that service to other companies building their infrastructure out for them. They don't necessarily care that they're running a database in Oracle or they're running their infrastructure in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. It's just that it's easy to work with, low cost, and they get the benefit of that.
And before we go, you kind of alluded to some of what I'm going to ask next, but if someone wants to learn more about how Mosier could help with this type of technology, how can they get the assistance they need?
I think the best and most direct way is to go to our website, and that's Mosier, Moserit, T is in tech.com, and go to, in the upper right corner, just click on contact. You'll go to the contact form page and just fill that out and submit the form from there. And we can begin, and our business development staff will probably field that initially and funnel it on to kind of the technology area. And I'd be more than willing to sit and talk with anyone from the organization, any thought leader. And yeah, you kind of alluded that in the question, and I'll just use this as a one-off example before I wrap. A lot of times people don't know what they really need or the solution to provide that need or to fill that need. We had a customer that's been in conversation with us that we provided some degree of managed services for them. They run their own, they're a fairly small organization. They certainly do not have any IT staff. That's effectively what we had been providing the managed services for. But they were doing a series of tasks that were heavily manual. And they were just sort of expressing the general need, like, hey, is there anything you can do to automate this at all, even some semblance of automating? And they were storing everything in a series of Excel spreadsheets out in SharePoint. So they had no way to track their historical data, and then even managing the incoming data that they were getting from their different customers they support. There was no way to work with that. And so they just started with that basic need. And we sort of devised as a first phase for them, just running the autonomous database service in OCI. And especially because they're a small organization with no IT staff, they definitely wanted something that's hands-free that we're taking care of for them, or that, more to the point, OCI is running for them, but also something that's not going to cost an arm and a leg to provide this basic service behind them. But by running the autonomous database service, it brings with it, layered in front of it, is a low-code application development tool called Application Express, or Apex. And so we're able to build a front-end interface, a series of screens, more like a workflow app that just says, hey, a new file has come in, it's been uploaded, log in here to the application, and then it walks them through the screen and says, okay, this file came in, we've identified these records in it that have failed the edit checks that we've defined, and go ahead and correct them through this interactive grid here on the screen, submit the form, and it gets transmitted via API to an outside entity where they were having to email those forms before. So we were able to automate the back end for them. And it's all just simply by running the Oracle Autonomous Database with Apex that came with it built in front of it. So they have a back end database for their historical data and for the application data that's coming in, and pretty much like a full stack development, all just simply from running autonomous database service. So we haven't even actually yet, at least, created for them a VCN running any other VMs or any other services behind that. So that's just an example of the power that a lot of times people that just have a basic need or just an annoyance of how they do their day-to-day business. If they're just supplying a need, we can find a solution for them by devising something in OCI.
And I think that's a great example of just how powerful just even just running that autonomous database, just what it can do. And then obviously when we get involved, when we bring the human aspect of this into play, it becomes much, much more. Well, Chris, we certainly appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for talking with us about OCI, about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Motion Consulting. We hope you enjoy listening to Chris Boyd talk to us about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Join us next time when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Remember to send us your ideas or topics via our social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get it. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.